Hey, it's the Fort Worth Playboy.
And my Playboys Bunny.
Welcome to our podcast where we discuss pickup, game, relationships, and
Sex.
today's topic is a girl's life phases and why they matter. The most unsexy title.
We couldn't think of anything sexier.
But
it's important.
It's super important, and it will kind of help you. One, as a player, you need to be able to just get it. Like, understand why women do what they do, when they do it, and just get it. Because the more you can be one of those guys that just gets it, the more you'll have sex.
And I would say this applies not only to the players, I think it applies equally as much to the men who genuinely want to find a girlfriend.
Yes.
Get married.
Yes.
Start a family. You're kind of in that phase where you're kind of like, I'd like to start the adult portion of my life now, please.
And this will explain a lot of like why girls do what girls do.
Yeah.
You know?
In a good way. So
guys have their life process of maturing, and a lot of them go in the military, they start their first job, they go to trade school, all that. We're not going to cover that today. What we're going to cover is girls. Girls' process is they have to date in order to get a proposal, to get married. They go through an engagement. They have a wedding. They buy a house. All of this is so they can have babies. And that's the hardwired part.
Yeah.
All of that has to happen. And the guy is not let in on any of this. You know what I mean? And that's an entire topic of its own.
Yeah.
Usually the engagement or the proposal and the engagement are the linchpins to where people go south. But that is a girl's life cycle.
Right.
Everything else is negotiable. She can work outside of the home and still go through these phases. She can be a stay-at-home mom. None of that matters as long as these things are getting hit.
Right.
Which
is a little bit ironic because truly girls are terrible at long-term planning. And yet this one thing, this one concept that we're discussing tonight is truly a life phase that is it's ingrained in her, in every girl, in every female. It's ingrained as the long-term plan.
Exactly.
Because in the end, we're not even just picturing the babies. We're picturing the grandkids on the porch, Easter Sundays, everybody coming to our house, hosting everyone, being surrounded by family. But we have to back up several steps to make that our reality.
And it's interesting because girls will hit this anywhere from like 18 to 32. Just depending on, like I was kind of a late bloomer. I didn't get married till I was in my 30s.
Right.
And it was always interesting to watch some of these girls, what we call the affluent fives. These are girls that hit college knowing that they need to lock in a husband, get the MRS degree.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, they didn't pay any attention whatsoever to any man who, one, had no marriage interest.
Right.
No marriage potential.
Right.
And I didn't really understand it at the time, but it's because they were looking for a very specific man. One that they could date and would propose and get married soon after college graduation. And a lot of people do. You'll see an entire group of people that get married that first year after college.
Well, you are describing me.
Yeah.
You are describing my story. Like, and just like girls now will have marriage Pinterest boards young. Pinterest did not exist when I was in high school. But I had notebooks filled with pictures and ideas in high school of what I wanted my wedding to look like. My high school boyfriend, intelligently, did not want to get married right out of high school or, and try to, go through college together while married and things like that. And truly, I broke up with him my freshman year of high school because I was like, this man's not going to want to get married for at least another 3 years.
Was it freshman high school or college?
I'm sorry. Did I say freshman in college? We had been together since our freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
And so I was then certain that it was going to be at least 3 years, because he was very logical, until we could get married. By the way, he was 40 before he ended up actually getting married.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that would have made me
That was
nuts.
a bullet you missed.
But, and I literally married the first man that I met who fit exactly the criteria you're describing. He was also in kind of a mindset. He wanted to get married. He wanted to start family. You know, he had a job. He was older. You know, all of the things that I loved and was looking for. It was just like a timing thing.
Yeah.
And so we got married, and within 2 years we were having children. I mean, we had the house, we had all of the things that you're talking about, you know, that was me.
Yeah.
And I was at a Christian university, and it was a running joke in our dorm that, you know, what girls were going for the MRS degree essentially.
And it's funny, and this is just some like inside. Guys are always like, they'll say, hey, where do I find a girl with like a low in count?
Yeah.
A girl that's either a virgin or had sex with like 1 or 2 guys.
Yeah.
Where do you find these girls? And I will tell you, you will go to a private university,
Yes.
private Christian universities, or, you know what, let's say TCU. And it's relatively a Christian, Texas
It
Christian.
is yeah, it's the same denomination as. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's where you'll find your girls that might have had a high school boyfriend.
Yeah.
And when they hit the ground running at a university, they have no interest in experiencing things.
Right.
They are focused in on, they'll usually join a sorority or something that's social so they can meet men that are eligible.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And they have no interest in experimenting or experiencing lots of dicks. They want to find one guy that has potential to be a husband.
Right.
And then they just stick, and they make sure that works. And usually the guys are also marriage minded. You know, they have kind of voiced their, hey, I want to get married, like, and get my job going and build a family.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to the guys that are like, I like to party.
I like to lift weights.
I'm not looking for anything serious.
Yeah.
You know, and the girl's like, she'll ghost, and you can't blame her. But girls that do know, be it through either genetics or their mom's coaching them,
right,
or their family structure, or they're just like know what they want.
Yeah.
And they just have a different experience than the girls that go, well, I just want to like party. I want to experience a lot of men. You know, I want to have a lot of fun. And it's kind of like we say, you know, girls that just want to have fun, you might want to avoid them if you're looking for something serious.
Well, and we see that in girls who kind of went off to school as far away from their parents as they could. Yeah. If you ask where they went to school or where they went to university and why they chose that, these girls will say, I wanted to get as far away from my parents as I could.
Yeah.
You know, they cross the state, they go across state lines, you name it.
Yeah.
Those are girls who wanted to experience college.
Yeah.
Now, I will say what you're talking about with the private university girls, err on the side of earlier in the education process. The freshmen, maybe still the sophomores, but once they start doing rushes and going into the sorority stuff where it's always a social event and always surrounded by frat boys, that's when, and as they get a little bit older, if they get to junior or senior year and they haven't locked in a serious boyfriend potential guy, they're going to be experimenting. They're going to be running through a lot more men. They're going to be kissing a lot more frogs.
Exactly.
Because they're desperate.
Exactly.
It's almost like the clock starts ticking.
Exactly.
If they're not locking in a guy by then, they're feeling kind of fucked.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just like closing time.
And then they're justifying not having a guy also, and you know, well,
maybe I'll just pursue
there's
a career.
time.
Yeah.
I'll pursue my career first and things like that. So if you want to lock in a girl early because you are maybe older, and I recommend it being a little bit older, you know, if you're graduating college, focus more on the freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah. And they're looking for you.
Yeah,
you
they
know.
are.
So that's the dating. Then they need a proposal.
Yes. This is an important step that sounds obvious, but a lot of men, in our experience, completely miss.
I'd say less than 20% know
Oh my
that this
gosh.
is what the girl's goal is.
Yeah.
If you're dating exclusively before the age of 30 and you haven't already been married, or it's very, that's what she's dating for.
Yeah.
And quite often, girls will give a guy, I say 2 years.
Yes, I think at 2 years.
Yeah, and it's funny
Is
because
a threshold.
we were just talking about this earlier this week, and we see it with a girl that she's in that marriage window, or to get married, and at 24 months, if that ring doesn't come out on the second anniversary,
Yeah.
that jaw starts getting tight, and at about 2 years and 6 months, they're so wound up.
Yeah, that's the perfect word.
They literally physically look like they could shatter. Because they're just, though. I mean, we're talking about pleasant, fun, cool girls,
Yeah.
and they get short-tempered with everything. Because they're looking at like, fuck, I just wasted.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to break up with this dumbass.
Yeah.
I mean, they give you 2 years, and that's it.
Absolutely.
God. And you were already, how long did you date your first husband? Before you guys got
a
married?
year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what you call, what would you say? That's a fast mover, but not unusual.
Yeah.
Not unusual for the ones that like,
But again, we were like both kind of on a mission.
why wait?
I'm not saying it was the best plan. I'm saying
Yeah.
it was the timing.
But why wait? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And we see that too, like with the girls that have a fast mover. And I've had girls that like started training with me, and I've told you this before, and a year later they're pregnant. They like met the guy
Yeah.
that's older.
Yeah.
He wants to get married. He knows what he wants, and he's already established. They're married, usually moving into his house, and she's pregnant by the end of the first year.
Exactly.
She didn't even know
Yeah.
him, and it's just, and they stay together,
Yeah. Yeah.
But making sure that proposal happens, a lot of girls, if he doesn't know or isn't on board, they'll pull the ripcord and have to bail.
Yeah.
And quite often, unfortunately, if she didn't do a good job of vetting him, he didn't even know he was supposed to get proposed.
Right.
That's the problem with these girls. Sometimes, like, pick a guy that's kind of clueless and he just wants to date, and she wants the plan fulfilled.
Right.
What do you think girls do to kind of like move them along towards that when they're younger?
I think there's a lot of not so subtle hint dropping. I mean, when you go by ring shops, let's just look, or buying bridal magazines. Girls buy bridal magazines like guys buy muscle magazines. I mean, I know magazines aren't really a thing, but like genuinely bridal magazines still are.
Yeah.
I think that they say, well, when we have kids, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's a lot of like future talk from the female perspective. Well, when we da 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 da.
I like that.
They'll
That's
do
interesting.
that a lot. But truly, like you're saying, if the men aren't picking up on the cues, then she has no choice but to break up with him, because she knows that if he proposed tomorrow, it would still be at least 6 months on the shortest possible end of the spectrum, more like 18 to 24 more months before the wedding, then another few years before the kids start. You're talking about a 5-year gap if you don't propose tomorrow, and she's only doing the math in her head going, I'm going to be 30 if we don't get this ball going before we even start having the 4 kids we've discussed.
Exactly. And that's where the 2 years.
Yeah.
They'll give them 2 years, and then they start getting very, very uptight
Yeah.
about it, And we see this right now with a girl that we know, she's waiting.
And here's like Fort Worth says, you've got to just get it, because a lot of men make this mistake of thinking that you don't have to go through these beginning steps. You can talk about the kids and stuff. She'll be, because she's truly, it all revolves around the fact that she wants to be able to have kids. So you're like, well, okay, I mean, we can have some kids. We can move in together and, have some kids.
Yeah.
No. That's not what she's saying.
No.
She's not saying she wants to have kids now. She's saying she needs to be able to have kids in 5 years. So you need to take these steps to get to that point.
Right.
A lot of men hear her talking about, how many kids do you want to have? I want to have 2. Do you want to have 2? Do you want to have 3? You want to have 4? Oh, okay. What will we name our kids? And they think that that's actually what the next step is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. That's
I
very
think
interesting.
that's why the proposal is so lost.
I can see that.
And the bullshit about like, well, we're not going to have a wedding and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
guys have some crazy ideas
yeah.
that always get squelched because his family and her family and her are like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Yeah. Bless you.
There's a lot of magical thinking before,
Yeah.
and I always, even on Twitter when we talk about like polls, like how much you spend on an engagement ring, and guys will be like, yeah, no engagement ring. I'd be like, well, how does her family feel about that? And are people surprised you're married when she has no ring? They're like, oh, she's got a wedding ring.
Yeah.
All they're doing is like, yeah, we just skipped one.
Yeah.
There's always, everything always ends up following the pattern.
Right.
I mean, they're like, I'm not going to spend anything, and they're like, oh, I can't get anything for $500.
Well, and my concern with that is, I understand that in a lot of people's minds that marriage is kind of a bum deal when it goes wrong. And I understand that the likelihood is somewhere between now and your 60-year anniversary, something might go wrong. And it might not get there. I get it. But if this is someone that you're planning on investing a life with, and you're planning on creating a family with, and buying a home with, and you're not willing to invest a little bit, most girls don't even need they don't have this need to be the biggest rock on the block as far as her wedding ring. But if you're not willing to invest in an engagement ring, how much does that really say about what you're willing to invest in the relationship as a whole?
It's a good question. I mean, because I come from both sides. I mean, as a guy, I'm like, it's just a symbol. It's just a rock that's been marketed,
Yeah.
But she has a good point. And a lot of girls tell them Ryan Stone's story.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ryan Stone, he is in a... I wonder if he knows how much I talk about him on our podcast. But I think he's got an interesting point, and a very good point. They're in a... what is it called?
Common law?
Common law marriage. They're up in Canada. They didn't have a wedding, but they're married. For all intents and purposes, they are married. And his understanding was he realized through gifts and through holidays and all kinds of stuff that it was less about the wedding or less about the marriage than it was about the fact that she needed a good story to tell her friends. She needed the bling. She needed the symbol to be representative. And so he wasn't giving her an actual wedding. He wasn't giving her that story of a great proposal. So he gave her the biggest rock he could possibly, the flashiest ring, I think is the way he put it, of any of her friends. And she was happy as can be.
Happy as a lark.
I don't know in their situation if she's already had a wedding and maybe that was kind of, because some girls are like, I've already had the wedding. I don't really need,
Yeah.
some girls are like, I had a wedding. It was shit. It was done on a $600
broke.
budget when
Yeah.
when we had no money. So I'd like to have a wedding now because I'd like to celebrate actually finding a really good guy
Right.
that I enjoy doing life with. I mean, a lot depends on kind of your stage of life.
Yeah.
But it's we talk about this a lot. You don't start a business without having a plan for success and investing in it and expecting it to do well.
It's true. There are men that imagine her moving in with no paperwork
Yeah.
and then popping out kids
Yeah.
with no net or no safety net, no certainty. Whereas, like, you have a business, you have to actually register it with the state.
Yeah.
I have an LLC.
Yeah.
You have to have insurance.
Yeah.
You have to, like, sign documents. If you're in a partnership, you sign documents that say, hey, we're in this LLC together, and this is how we stay together, and this is what we agree to, and then if we decide to dissolve it, it looks like this.
Yeah.
And then guys are like, yeah, just move in.
Yeah.
Then we'll have some kids that you're responsible for 20 years. Minimum.
Right. Oh, at least.
You know?
My,
You're like,
my dad still sends me cash for no
Yeah,
reason whatsoever.
it is, and I get, and we're in a looser player environment.
Yeah.
I get that guys don't want to get married.
Right.
But I also work with the numbers. Most guys get married because 90% of women will have a child by the time they're 40.
Yes.
Yes, that's backing off a little bit right now, but the chances that the girl in front of you is going to want to have kids,
It's
it's high.
Yeah.
If they don't, there's something off. 90% of women today have children by the age of 40.
Yeah.
So the ones that are going like, yeah, I'm probably okay not having kids, because you want to like not have kids because you want to like whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
At about 30, 32, like a switch gets flipped, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to have kids.
Right.
Because I feel sick every day not having kids, So it's just how they're wired. And that, let's talk about engagement.
Yeah.
When do things go bad in engagement? I don't know that much about engagements. How long does an engagement normally last?
Normally 18 months.
Holy shit.
Well, a lot depends on if they're young,
Yes.
if it's truly going to be a big event, if it's the event of the year,
Yeah,
whatever.
got it.
Because it takes a while to plan a wedding.
Yeah.
And actually have it planned in a way that anybody would want to attend
And
or
most
enjoy.
venues are a year out.
Most venues, and that's probably the biggest factor.
Yeah.
Is
that's
that
interesting.
is that actual like reserving someplace.
Yeah.
Which is why right now there's a trend that people are like getting married on Tuesdays and getting married
The
in the
logistics.
week
Yeah.
because you can't get a venue otherwise.
Fascinating.
And I think that's a lot just COVID rollover.
Yeah.
But 6 months is pushing it.
Yes.
It's done.
It's fast.
But it's pushing it.
Yeah, and it's stressful for the girl.
And oftentimes it's because she's already pregnant.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. But generally speaking, I would say 1 to 1.5, 2 years on the far end of engagement.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of women who, if they've already had their kids, if they're on a multiple marriage situation, they kind of are okay with being engaged forever or having a quote unquote long engagement because they want to make sure that everybody's really, really, really suited.
Right.
The families are really getting along together. They realize how critical it is that everybody gets along. But if you're still on the front end of wanting to have kids and start a family and do everything in the right order of things, then I'm going to say 12 to 24 months is a standard engagement.
Interesting.
Period.
How many of these engagements do you think falter? I don't know that. Again,
I don't know that many
Yeah.
engagements that are called off.
Interesting.
Not in my world.
Yeah. The bride being left at the altar or running off at the last minute, these are great stories.
I think those are good for movie
but
plots
they're
and
very
sitcom.
rare.
Yeah.
Very rare. And then the wedding.
Yeah, the wedding.
I mean,
The
did
most-
you guys have a big wedding?
Yes.
Okay. Girls.
Medium, I would say.
Yeah,
we had
and
medium.
there's a lot of guys. They're like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Literally, my wedding was $600.
Yeah.
And it was all flowers. Like, that's where all the expense was just flowers. It's so
Yeah,
weird.
you can spend as much as you want. And there are, and I've trained couples that they didn't do a wedding. I mean, she was like, nah. But that's the rarity.
Yeah.
There's usually sometimes, and again, it's not about, I hate to say this, it's not about you. It's about your families,
Yeah.
your parents, wanting to be there and you taking that next step.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that you kind of have to keep in mind, like what is comfortable for you, especially for guys that don't do a lot of social stuff.
Yeah.
You have to go, okay, but it's not about you. It's like, her family really wants this. Her family really wants this.
Yeah.
And your family really wants this.
Yeah.
So go.
It's like
Yeah.
walking across the stage at graduations.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like all kinds of stuff that maybe you don't give a shit
You can
about.
give a fuck.
Yeah. I mean, my eldest son walked the stage when he graduated college, not because he cared. It was merely a stepping stone to the next college, experience.
yeah.
But he knew that I would be devastated if I didn't see him walk after, 4 years of work.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it matters. I mean, it matters to parents.
Yeah.
Because quite often they had a wedding. I mean, the older they are, the more traditional generally.
Sure.
But, they were more broke. So, and, depending on if you're in your mid-20s as opposed to like, she's 35 and you're 40 or 45, it's your first, it just depends.
Yeah.
What your priorities are. But most of the time, it's not even about the groom. It's about the bride and the families.
And I would also say, along the lines of exactly what you're saying, is if you're a young couple, the wedding is being paid for by her family almost completely exclusively. So even if you don't want to have a wedding, if her parents want to throw you a $50,000 party, fucking go to the $50,000 party.
Exactly.
Let your bride do whatever she wants to do.
I don't think a lot of these guys realize that it's the bride's family that tends to take most of the costs.
Yeah.
They're like,
If you're an adult, if you've divorced once and you're having, if you can have a good party, then you have a little bit more appreciation for it if you're paying for it yourself. But you also then,
you find something in your budget.
Yeah, you kind of go in together and say, what do we want to do?
And again, no one fucking cares.
No.
I mean, like, your friends and family, and they're coming to a $5,000 wedding. They don't give a fuck as long as you're there.
Yeah.
That's all they care about.
Exactly. Like, we attended a great reception last year.
It was
and
off the hook.
They had a very small ceremony that literally
Just
was
family.
just like essentially in front of a judge. It was I think it was essentially a courtroom kind of courthouse thing. And then they had a big party.
Exactly.
And it was a great time.
It was great.
But that way all the friends got to celebrate, but
Exactly.
it was actually kind of nice not to have to sit through the
Yeah.
ceremony.
I mean,
selfishly.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you'll find that sweet spot, but you kind of have to do something.
Yeah.
And I kind of get it. And a lot of these people, when they go, yeah, we had a $100,000 wedding, you don't realize, because you read that, you don't realize that guy paid nothing.
Right.
It was the families that paid everything.
Yeah.
They didn't expect some guy that's in his first job, and she's like, in her first job as a marketing manager.
Yeah.
To spend $100,000. That's the father of the bride flexing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Let him flex. Let the
no.
man have his day.
It's,
as long as the girl's happy.
Exactly.
So that's the wedding. Then you get into usually what I
house.
see traditionally, and this is a big issue right now, but we're not going to get into the particulars. But usually it takes a couple years, and they want a house. Even we live in an apartment because I hate to do maintenance. And I like living a mile from my gym.
Yeah.
And where we train. And I'm all about, like, I just don't want to drive.
Yeah,
No,
we
not a
don't
big
like
commute,
driving.
no.
We like being in a walkable area.
Yeah.
We like being where we can ride our bikes anywhere we want to go.
Yeah.
It suits us. We like the energy of our neighborhood.
Exactly. And that's just me. I mean, when I did have a house, every weekend was like 14 to 16 hours of like lawn care. And I would go to work exhausted.
Yeah.
Literally the weekends were, I went to work and would take a nap.
And this is a great example of women always following suit, because when I was married and had a home and spent all weekend doing lawn care and things on the house and in the evenings and stuff, I loved it. And if Fort Worth loved being out in the country or being out in the suburbs, I would love whatever that was.
Yeah, girls go along with whatever, you know. But you have to find your sweet spot. But for homes, I mean, even like when I see like a young couple here in our apartments, they're usually passing through.
Yeah, sure.
Our house is being built, and then we're going to move out there.
Yeah.
That's what I usually see. Is
Exactly.
They're like, or
It's
we're
a
house
temporary.
hunting for 6 months, and then we're going to move. Because just like your average, New York City, of course, is different, but apartments aren't designed much for children, you know.
Right,
Or
right.
families, I should say.
Right.
And they'll admit that, you know, guys that build multifamily units just go, we should, but we don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
ideally we should, because they'll stick around longer. But the house has to be there because kids tend to do better in a house.
Absolutely.
Like, my kids are in a house.
Yeah.
You know, so, and they have a backyard and a front yard and acreage to run around on.
And apartments don't tend to be in the best school districts.
That's a good point.
So you have to, and
Yeah.
even if they're just being born, these are things that your wife at least will be obsessing over. Is
Yeah.
the school district that the house is in.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So the house has to happen, or some type of permanent domicile.
Yes.
You know, it's where you have to move out of the basement with your parents. You know, even though a lot of people do that for a couple years.
Sure.
You know, when they're newly married, they're like, oh yeah, we lived with my parents. And
We
in
lived
the
with
basement."
his parents the first year.
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go.
I don't remember why, but it made sense at the time.
Yeah. I mean, you save a lot of money.
Yeah.
You save a lot of money. And that's an American thing, too, because a lot of countries, like overseas, Europe, like the guys will live at home till they get married.
Yeah.
They might be in their 30s or late 30s,
Right.
you know? And then they don't go far. They
Yeah.
don't go far. But then the kids come.
Then the kids start coming.
It's either planned mentally or her hormone trigger flips
Yeah.
and it's on.
Once it's on, it's on.
It can't be turned off.
There's no flipping that switch back.
And you do start seeing some divorces because he's ambivalent about kids, and she's following her biological imperative,
Yeah,
and it's not compatible. So she has to start over.
it's true. And I think that's where having these kinds of conversations, really having these kinds of conversations before you're engaged, preferably, because once you're engaged, the rose-colored glasses go on, and you tend to ignore red flags as they come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're in marriage mode then. You're like,
Yeah.
I'm getting to the next step. I'm almost there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the adrenaline, it's kind of like being in the middle of a race and trying to then, and then coming up with the race plan, the training plan.
Bunny's talked about this before, and it was kind of a blind spot for me because I had never really thought about it that much. But once the engagement starts, it's kind of hard to make adjustments.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people go, well, we've only dated for a year, but we'll have a year engagement. Well, now the ball's rolling.
Yeah.
It's like having tickets for a flight. You're like, okay, we got to get on that plane. We got to get on that plane. We got to get on that plane.
Exactly.
And everything else goes to the wayside.
Yeah, you
know?
pay no attention to anything else.
Exactly. You're like, if I just get on the plane, everything will be okay after that. And they start thinking, if I can just get to the wedding, we'll work this out once we get
It's
in
a
the house
terrible
together.
plan.
Yeah.
Terrible plan.
But I think that first 2 years there is some failures because they've just never lived together, and it's too much.
Yeah, I've always heard that the first year of marriage is the hardest.
Yeah.
And I
can
get
see
it.
that.
You know, I get it. And that's true, I think, even if they've lived together in a lot of times. Because her pressures usually kind of amp up with getting a house, with having babies, all this stuff. It's like as soon as the wedding happens, it's like suddenly she's like, okay, now we've got to get out of this apartment. We've got to get out of your parents' house. Now we need to start our own life. Now we need to start thinking about buying a house. And he's like, whoa.
Yeah. He's like, God, can't we relax?
We just got through this marathon.
And girls are on to the next thing.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I just went through a year marathon getting this wedding to happen.
Yeah.
And now we're house hunting for 2 years.
Yeah. So it's rough. But this is all part of the master plan that is female destiny.
Getting you to labor and delivery. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is she wants to be in labor and delivery. And that then you go into your next phase of life.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. It's really crazy.
Again, that girls have no other long-term plan that 9 times out of 10 that they can follow, and yet this is hardwired. If they were making the decisions, it wouldn't go well, but it's hardwired in us to go to this, to have this endpoint.
And that's where, like, Rollo talks about where girls don't follow they don't get married early.
Yeah.
They kind of like party through their 20s. And then what he calls like the epiphany stage, which is about 28. And they start seeing young girls getting the attention, but they're also like, I need to lock a guy down because now they're moving into their 30s and they need to have kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's why these girls that are coached or brought up or know through, you know, their parents or their peers, they don't go through any of that stuff.
Right.
They go through this cycle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This cycle of like, they're already married when they're 24.
Right.
You know, I mean, yeah, or they've been married for 4 years.
Exactly.
You know, and have 2 kids.
Well, like, I mean, you like to laugh. I mean, you know, Fort Worth likes to giggle or laugh. He doesn't giggle. That's not masculine at all. But, you know, I've got, my oldest child is 24 now.
Yeah.
By the time I was 24, I already had 2 toddlers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, and we had been married for 2 years before we had children. Like, the whole thing. Like,
yeah. Right on time.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. And that's normal. I mean, a lot of guys, they look back, they're like, man, I'm 32 and I'm just getting married. My dad was 25, had a house.
Yeah.
And 3 kids.
Exactly.
You know, and a lot of it, and this is what we've talked about, you know, a lot of, I think one of the problems or one of the challenges is men are not given much responsibility.
It's true.
Earlier on. All the boomers are still sticking around.
Sure.
You go to the office, the oldest guy there is 80 years old.
Yeah.
Instead of 55 or 60.
Sure.
You know, like it was for our parents. You know, you're old at 65.
And now they, like you're saying, those older people will not pass the baton the way that I think they assume everyone's an idiot. They assumed everyone was an idiot before too.
Yeah.
But they brought them up. They mentored them.
Yeah.
But people stuck around in jobs in order to be mentored. They stuck around.
Yeah, not to take the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to block.
Yeah.
Or not make any consideration whatsoever. So guys are not handed responsibility and the reciprocal, what would you say, compensation?
Yeah.
Like they were 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So
40,
you're
50
doing
years
more
ago.
with less.
Sure.
Or expected more with less.
It's
know?
true.
So that's what I've seen. I think a lot of the foot dragging sometimes comes down to economic.
Yeah.
And they're just not raised. They're just trying to get by.
Yeah.
You know, literally financially when before you could come out of high school. Guys got out when I graduated like in 86, guys were married and owned a house within a year.
Yeah.
And this is still when you could like pay for college by working a summer job.
Yeah.
You know.
Those were good times.
But that was about the end of it was late 80s.
Yeah.
Going into the 90s, you know.
When I graduated in 96 from high school, and guys that I went to high school with would work in the summers, save their money. As long as they went to state school, they pretty much didn't have any student debt.
Fascinating.
It was only those of us who went to private school,
Yeah.
because our families insisted on it, that really kind of racked up some bills.
Yeah. So, if you're delayed, or just the housing and all there's a lot of variables, but we wanted you to know that girls, the end goal is to have children.
Yeah.
And you can go, "Oh, I'm going to marry somebody that's not that interested in kids." Well, again,
You better really like her.
Remember that number. 90% are going to have kids by the age 40.
Yeah.
And that means she might be okay right up until about 38.
Yeah.
And then she says,
Shit. What did I do?
My mom hit menopause at 40. I can't ever have kids.
Yeah.
And then it's on.
And then she talks about adopting, all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But I mean, truly, there are couples who can't have children for one reason or the other, or choose not to. And you better really, really, really like that girl that you're with, because you're going to spend a lot of time together.
Yeah. So just know, even if she's like, "I'm okay not having kids," she may not be able to stick with that, from what we've seen. And
likely it is she can't.
Yeah. But along the way, I mean, things change in a decade. If you get married at 25, you're a different person at 35.
And your family and her family's asking you at every time they ever see you, ever.
Yeah.
When are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? Oh my gosh, you guys will make the cutest babies.
Yeah. And a lot of girls, they don't want to hear it, especially when they're single.
Yeah.
You're like, or they go, "And then we brought our child with us," and they show you their dog.
Their fur baby.
Nothing makes parents more crazy than the grand dog.
Anyway, girls have a master plan. It's literally the only master plan they have in their entire lives.
That's it.
And you need to be aware of it. This is the longest podcast we've ever done, but it's because it consists of about 7 points.
Yeah.
It's critical, though. I hope that you've actually stuck with this, because it is important that you truly grasp this concept. Because in the end, we want you to win. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, share with your single friends, and know that we want you to win. Bye!